chandelier light danced across the marble floors of Carnegie Hall, where New York's elite mingled in their finest black tie attire. Crystal glasses clinked, and the air buzzed with anticipation for the night's recital. This was no ordinary venue. It was the stage where musical giants were forged. Pierce Whitmore, at 52, smoothed his silk bow tie, his silver hair gleaming under the golden glow. A piano virtuoso with a career studded with accolades, he was the evening's star, set to conquer Chopin's toughest pieces with ease. For him, this was just another night of brilliance, another standing ovation waiting to happen. "Mr. Whitmore, your stage is ready," came a quiet voice. He turned to see Hadley, a young woman in her early 30s, dressed in a plain cream sweater and gray skirt, her blonde hair tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail. Her name tag marked her as venue staff, her calloused hands hinting at a life of hard work. "Thanks," Pierce muttered, barely acknowledging her. To him, she was invisible, just another face in the crowd of ushers and servers who faded into the background of his world. He strode toward the stage, ready to claim the spotlight. But as Pierce began his performance, something unexpected unfolded. During a break, as a jest to the audience, he invited Hadley, ordinary, unassuming Hadley, to play a piece on the grand piano. The crowd tittered, expecting a clumsy attempt, a moment of amusement at her expense. Instead, Hadley sat at the keys, her rough hands hovering for a moment before diving into Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The notes flowed with a clarity and passion that silenced the room. Each chord was precise, each phrase alive with emotion that rivaled the master's. The audience sat stunned, their whispers replaced by awe. Pierce's smirk faded. This wasn't supposed to happen. Hadley, the nobody, was commanding the stage he'd ruled for decades. When she finished, the hall erupted in applause, a standing ovation not for him, but for her. In that moment, the simple woman with calloused hands became the night's true star, her hidden gift rewriting the story of the evening and maybe her life forever. The applause thundered through Carnegie Hall, a tidal wave of sound that seemed to shake the chandeliers. Hadley stood frozen at the piano, her hands trembling slightly as she stared out at the sea of faces, their eyes wide with astonishment. The elegant crowd, dripping in diamonds and tailored suits, was on its feet, clapping with a fervor usually reserved for the likes of Lang Lang or Yo-Yo Ma. Pierce Whitmore, still standing stage-side, felt the air shift, his spotlight stolen by the unassuming woman he'd meant to mock. He cleared his throat, forcing a smile as he stepped forward, the consummate professional. "Well," he said into the microphone, his voice carrying a slight edge, "it seems we've discovered a hidden gem tonight." The crowd laughed lightly, but their attention stayed on Hadley, who looked like she wanted to melt into the polished stage floor. Hadley managed a shy nod, her cheeks flushed, and slipped off the bench, retreating toward the wings. But the audience wouldn't let her go that easily. Calls of encore and "play again" echoed through the hall. Pierce's jaw tightened. This was his night, his triumph. Yet here he was, upstaged by a staffer who probably scrubbed floors for a living. Backstage, Hadley leaned against a velvet curtain, catching her breath. Her heart pounded, not just from the performance, but from the weight of what had just happened. She'd played piano since she was a kid, sneaking practice on the old upright at her small-town church in Ohio. It was her escape from a life of scraping by, waiting tables, cleaning houses, and now working events at Carnegie Hall to make ends meet. She'd never dreamed of playing here, let alone for this crowd. "Hadley, right?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Elena Voss, the concert hall's director, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s with a reputation for spotting talent. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Hadley hesitated, twisting her name tag. "Just around. My grandma taught me the basics, and I kept at it. Never had formal lessons or anything." Elena's eyebrows shot up. "No formal training? That's extraordinary. You realize you just brought the house down out there?" Hadley gave a small shrug, unsure how to respond. "I just played what I felt." Elena studied her for a moment, then handed her a business card. "Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. We need to talk about your future." Meanwhile, Pierce lingered in the green room, sipping a glass of bourbon, his ego bruised. He'd meant to humiliate Hadley, to prove his superiority with a cruel little joke. Instead, she'd turned the tables, her raw talent exposing a truth he couldn't ignore. Genius didn't always come with a pedigree or a spotlight. He glanced at his reflection in a mirror, the lines on his face suddenly deeper. For the first time in years, he felt the sting of irrelevance. The next morning, Hadley sat in Elena's office, still in her modest sweater, clutching the business card like a lifeline. Elena leaned forward, her voice firm but kind. "I've already spoken to a few contacts. There's interest, serious interest. A scholarship to Juilliard, private lessons with top instructors, maybe even a debut recital if you're ready. This could be your shot, Hadley." Hadley's eyes widened. Juilliard, a recital. It was too much, too fast. I'm nobody. I don't belong in that world." Elena smiled. "You belong anywhere you choose to be. That stage last night, it was yours. Not Pierce's, not anyone else's. Yours." Back in her tiny Brooklyn apartment that night, Hadley sat at her second-hand keyboard, staring at the keys. The memory of the crowd's roar, the feel of the grand piano under her fingers, lingered like a dream. She thought of her grandma, who'd played hymns with the same passion Hadley poured into Chopin. She thought of Pierce's stunned face, the way the world had shifted in a single moment. She took a deep breath and began to play, the notes filling the small room with a quiet fire. Maybe Elena was right. Maybe one moment could change everything, and maybe, just maybe, that moment was hers to claim. Hadley's fingers danced across the keys of her worn-out keyboard, the notes of Chopin's Nocturne spilling into her cramped Brooklyn apartment. The room was a far cry from Carnegie Hall's grandeur. Peeling wallpaper, a flickering lamp, and a stack of unpaid bills on the table. But the music felt just as alive. She played until the early hours, losing herself in the melody, her mind wrestling with Elena's offer. Juilliard, a recital, a future she'd never dared to imagine. It was exhilarating, but it also terrified her. What if she didn't belong in that polished world? What if last night was a fluke? By morning, Hadley was exhausted but resolute. She pulled on her coat and headed to Elena's office, the business card tucked in her pocket like a talisman. The city buzzed around her, honking cabs, chattering pedestrians, the pulse of New York. But she felt like she was moving through a dream. When she arrived, Elena was waiting, her desk cluttered with sheet music and a steaming mug of coffee. "You came," Elena said, her eyes bright with approval. "I wasn't sure you would." Hadley shifted in her seat, her hands clasped tightly. "I'm still not sure. This all feels too big. I'm just a small-town girl who plays for herself. I don't know how to be a star." Elena leaned back, studying her. "You don't need to be a star, Hadley. You need to be you. What you did last night wasn't just skill. It was soul. That's what people heard. That's what they'll pay to hear again." Elena slid a folder across the desk. Inside were papers outlining a full scholarship to Juilliard's evening division, tailored for working adults, along with a mentorship program under a renowned pianist. There was also a proposal for a debut recital in 6 months, a smaller venue but still prestigious. Hadley's breath caught as she read the details. It was real. This was happening. "I've already got calls from agents," Elena added. "They're sniffing around, wanting to know who the mystery pianist from last night is. But this is your call, Hadley. You can walk away, go back to your life, or you can take the leap." Hadley thought of her old life, endless shifts, sore feet, and the quiet comfort of her keyboard at night. Safe but small. Then she thought of the stage, the way the music had carried her beyond herself, the way the crowd had seen her, really seen her, for the first time. She nodded slowly. "I'll do it." Across town, Pierce Whitmore sat in his Upper West Side penthouse, the city skyline glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. His phone buzzed with messages from colleagues and critics, all buzzing about the Carnegie Hall Cinderella. He scrolled through X, where clips of Hadley's performance were already going viral, racking up thousands of likes and shares. "Who is this woman?" one post read. "Pierce Whitmore just got schooled," said another. He tossed the phone aside, his bourbon glass sweating in his hand. He'd built his career on discipline, on being the best, but Hadley's raw, untrained brilliance had shaken him. She wasn't just a fluke, she was a threat. Yet buried beneath his bruised pride, a spark of curiosity flickered. Could he learn something from her? Could she remind him of the fire he'd lost somewhere along the way? Weeks later, later, Hadley stood in a Juilliard practice room, her fingers trembling as she faced her new mentor, Dr. Lillian Chen, a no-nonsense pianist with a reputation for shaping prodigies. "Your technique's rough," Dr. Chen said bluntly after Hadley played a piece, "but your heart's in it. We'll refine the edges, not the soul." Hadley nodded, soaking up every word, her calloused hands ready to work. As she dove into lessons, balancing her studies with her job at Carnegie Hall,